Hmm. Mm. Mm. Hi, welcome, friends. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you today for Navigate Your Narratives, a live masterclass all about befriending the inner critic inside of your head, all about really tuning into this voice, this inner chitter chatter, as they would call it, the chitta vritta or the monkey mind in yoga, and learning how to really navigate what is our truth and what is not our truth inside of our head. And for those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting or connecting with, hi Jackie, I'm so happy you're here. My name is Ashlyn Bugby. I am an alignment coach and I help women come into soul alignment and feel fully expressed and embody their spiritual journey. And I'm so excited to be here with you today because I have pulled Navigate Your Narratives from my favorite module in my upcoming signature group program, Illuminate Your Life. And so, Illuminate Your Life is really truly a journey of self love and self discovery through the lens of meeting the different parts, the different archetypes of the self that lives within, and learning to love all of those parts because we are whole and worthy as we are. And when we are able to bring those parts and recognize those parts to the surface, that expands our capacity to love, that expands our awareness within our own self. And really, when we dive into these archetypes, we have many, many archetypes, but the ones that I've chosen to dive into and illuminate your life specifically are the higher self, the intuitive self, the shadow self, the past self, which is what we're going to be diving into today, the inner child, and the energetic self, and the embodied self. So, the past self, really, we gain our narratives from our past. We learned this story a long, long time ago, the narratives that go on inside of our head, and we identify that as our truth and have been repeating those stories over and over in our head, and with sometimes without us even knowing. So, I'm so excited to dive into this. Again, this is just a little snippet, a little sample of the work that we'll be doing in Illuminate Your Life. So stay tuned. I'll go into a few more details with that. And I am so excited that you're here and just thrilled. This is really a work along these lines is the work that I used to do in the yoga world. This is very similar to the workshops I used to host with Yoga Nidra in order to create a Sankalpa. So I know some of you are familiar with that language and with those terms, but Sankalpa is truly a statement of truth. And so that's what we're doing. And to identify your truth, you have to identify everything else, anything that's a lie, anything that's untrue. Again, kind of process of elimination. You have to, again, identify your truth to let everything else go. And when you let everything else go, you see what stays. And usually the things that you're letting go are past stories, our old narratives, our negative beliefs, our limiting stories. Again, all of that chitter chatter, all of that chitta vrita that oftentimes likes to be identified as truth from a place of the ego, but is not truly our authentic truth. So we're going to dive into that today. And I am so excited. Again, I am thrilled. I love seeing all of you pop on. Hey, Chelsea. Hey, Cami. So like I said, this is one of my favorite modules from Illuminate Your Life. And what struck me the most about this process and why I really dove into it years ago within the yoga world and why it's still so prevalent in my life today is because I don't know about any of you, but I literally remember the moment I was in a therapy session and my therapist was like, do you hear the rhetoric that's going on in your head? Do you hear the words that are coming out of your mouth? Do you hear the way that you truly speak to yourself, Ashlyn? And I was like, no, like I'm an aware person. I'm a yoga and meditation teacher. I'm pretty in tune with what I say. I'm pretty in tune with how I think. I'm a mindful person. And she was like, hold up, girl. Like, let's look a little bit deeper. And the narratives that I was telling myself in my head were harsh. We're downright mean sometimes. And again, I don't know if you can relate. Drop some hearts, drop a comment if you can. But sometimes we just normalize what's going on inside of our head to the degree that it becomes our truth. Like I had normalized that negative self-talk and the inner critic and those harsh words and being, again, just mean to myself and hard on myself, that became so normal. Like I thought that was what that's how everybody talk to yourself. That's how, everybody spoke to themselves. And then it occurred to me, like, no, because if you spoke to yourself that way, would you speak to anybody else that way? Would you speak to a child that way? Would you speak to a loved one or a family member, best friend? Would you speak to anybody that way? And that's when it hit me, and I was like, no, 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 no. I would never, ever say those words or say it in those phrases to anybody else. But somehow I validate that and think that's okay to say that to myself. And so that was a huge shift and a huge turning point for me. And that was, again, like a mind blown. So we're going to be working through that today. And I encourage you that, first of all, the negative voices that you hear inside of your head, that's all normal. That's all normal. Again, unfortunately, I can't promise you that those voices will ever go away, but I can encourage you and normalize those voices because you are human, because that is a part of the ego and we cannot exist without that part. But what I'm going to teach you in the next hour or so is learning how to befriend that part, learning how to navigate those narratives and shift towards a more empowering way you speak to yourself. So we're going to dive in a little bit further. Again, that was a little personal story about, yes, exactly. Yes, Jackie. So really what we're going to be diving into is freeing yourself from the negative self-talk and really enabling you to own and to speak your truth and speak that truth from an empowering and authentic place and break free from the harmful talk again, rather than giving into that negative self-talk, beginning to question it, beginning to shift it, begin to reframe it in a way that is going to completely change the way you speak to yourself as well. I just have some notes over here, so I'm just going over. So if you're on this, again, thank you for being here. I'm so happy you're here. And I hope that you're here because we all have that voice inside of our head. We all have that nagging voice that, like, sometimes it won't fucking shut up. I don't know if anybody else can relate, but here we're going to befriend that. We're going to dive a little bit deeper because this voice is not here to hurt us. This voice is not here to harm us. This voice is not here to shame us in any sort of way. Again, we're here to dive a little bit deeper and see what's below the surface. And so the first step is identifying our narratives. And when I say the word narratives, again, we're just kind of coming back to the, all of those words, the chitta vritta, the monkey mind, the self-talk, the negative self-talk, the inner critic. And again, that voice that likes to criticize you, that always has something negative to say, that, is the little devil on your shoulder, if that's what you'd like to refer it to as. Oh, and, again, it's a part of the conversation, it's a part of you, but it doesn't need to be at the forefront of the conversation. It doesn't need to be leading the conversation in your mind. So that is what really truly a narrative is. And again, to reiterate, we're all human and we all have that voice inside of our head. And I think it's so funny and it's so interesting that, we identify people as crazy who talk to themselves out loud. And that's one of the best ways to start to identify those narratives. So rather than thinking those people are crazy, or rather than, making fun of yourself or anybody else for talking to themselves out loud, you're really able to hear the way you talk to yourself. So I just want to normalize beginning to talk to yourself out loud, especially in times of anxiety, in times of stress, in times of overwhelm. It's okay to talk yourself through something. And that's, connecting deeper is when you hear that auditory part. That's when you begin to identify those narratives. When you say something, you're like, wait, you get to question that. Like, is that really what I think? Is that really my truth? So again, just beginning to have a conversation with that little voice, with that inner part inside of your head. And, we'll go deeper into really getting intimate with yourself and deepening this inner relationship with yourself and illuminate your life. So again, this is all just a taste. We're scraping the surface here. And I encourage you to be mindful and notice what's going on when you're on autopilot, when you're just going through the movements of your day, when you're going through the motions, and really becoming aware of what is churning in your head, what thoughts are coming up and what thoughts are occurring. And this can be truly done through the practice of meditation and observing these thoughts once more again during stress, during overwhelm, during times when you're more likely and even more susceptible to the inner critic, to those nagging voices, to the voices that said, you're not worthy of doing that, you shouldn't do that, you can't do that, you're not good enough. Again, in those places where you're scared and you're shrinking and you can physically feel it in your body, that's when you should turn on that other part of the mind that's going to question, that's going to listen even more carefully. So first up is really becoming aware of your thoughts, and especially the thoughts that occur to you on autopilot, because that means that you're not consciously choosing your thoughts. That means that some part of the subconscious mind is choosing these thoughts for you, and oftentimes identifying those thoughts as your truth, because again, this is all subconscious. And so now we're going to move through the negativity effect. And the negativity effect is when the brain hears a negative word, such as don't, can't, never. And using those words, we can't differentiate from negative and positive. The subconscious mind can't. And so when we hear those words, that's again when we want to turn that other part of the mind on and begin to question that. That's giving into a limiting belief, a limiting story, a story that's simply just not true that you're telling yourself. And a huge one was for me was the good old should. I should be doing this, I should be here, I should be doing that, that person's doing that, so now I should be doing that as well. The comparison trap, right? So anytime you hear that negative word, then again, the negativity effect here, begin to question, get curious, begin to invite in that conversation with yourself. Is that really something I should be doing? That person's doing that. Like, is that truly in alignment with what I want to do? Is that truly in alignment with my values? Is that in alignment with my truth? So again, always coming back to those questions and simply just beginning to listen to yourself a little more closely. Again, the phrases that are happening on autopilot. Again, when you identify any word that associates with a negative connotation, shouldn't, can't, don't, wouldn't, never, and becoming aware of those words. And, I have a mentor who tells me to celebrate when I hear some of those limiting beliefs, when I hear some of those negative words come up, because that means that I'm starting to be conscious and become aware of them. And, actually episode 9 of Intuitive Buzz, I interview one of my mentors, Steph, and she talks about all of this in NLP, a different approach to really reframing and re-identifying your limiting beliefs. So episode 9 of Intuitive Buzz, go check that out. And, a huge key part of this that I don't think is often taught is now tuning into the physical body. How does your body feel? How does your body physically respond when you hear all of those thoughts, when you begin to listen and give into the inner critic? So it's a lot of awareness here. Again, awareness of the mind, awareness of the thoughts. And now I'm asking you to drop back into your physical body again. Get out of the head, get into the body, because the body is where our stories actually live. It's actually held down to our cells, down to our muscles, down to the innermost workings, innermost parts of the physical self. And really, when we dive into that, this comes from the body keeps the score. When we dive into that, we're beginning to find where it's held. Allowing yourself to close down your eyes. Again, this can be done through meditation or just a few deeper breaths, and feeling into the part of the body that's being held, where you feel maybe a contraction, where you feel a tightness, a closed offness, or, a form of shrinking. Oftentimes this comes like within the heart and the belly, and you start getting small and you go into your little turtle shell. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, but becoming aware of what's happening in the physical body, because these stories are often stored within the body, and the body remembers much more longer than the mind. If the mind, oftentimes we forget a memory, oftentimes we, are not aware of what thoughts are occurring in our head, but our body remembers, our body holds on to it. That's why we practice tools like yoga to release that subconscious that is held within the body. So again, getting out of the head and tuning into the body and noticing what's happening in the body and where you can begin to identify that. And in Illuminate Your Life, we go into the embodied self, and we go into some embodiment practices that are extremely powerful. And we'll get to that a little bit later in this masterclass here as well. And one thing I'd love to point out as well, this is a study that I've always come back to, and this is a study that I talk about in a lot of my meditations, and that is pretty well known. So drop a heart or drop a comment if you're familiar with this, if you're picking up what I'm putting down, if that's what you want to call it. So Dr. Macy Moto's water experiment. So the snowflakes, the water, were held in 2 separate petri dishes. And one petri dish filled with water was spoken to with kind words, with loving words, with, nice and empowering words. And this other petri dish filled with water was spoken to in a way that was negative, that was harmful, that was degrading. And then, these snowflakes begin to grow, the water begins to freeze. And as, these words are being spoken, words hold vibrations to them. So as these words are spoken and these vibrations are being emitted out of your mouth, out of your body into these petri dishes of, water that is freezing and then beginning to create snowflakes, the water that froze, that was spoken to with loving, kind, and empowering words, created more geometrical shapes, more appealing and appeasing to the eye. And the water that was spoken to with negativity, with harsh words, disempowering phrases, it had distorted snowflakes, and snowflakes that were not necessarily geometric and less aesthetically pleasing to the eye. And I bring this up because our thoughts are so powerful. Again, as our thoughts translate into words and our words translate into vibrations. And so what we emit out, that begins to affect everything else around us. That begins to affect the frequencies and the vibrations that we come in contact with. And not only does that affect everything outside of us, but hello, newsflash, our body is like 70% water. And so when we begin to think those thoughts, again, whether those be empowering or whether those be disempowering and negative, that is felt, again, within the body. That is affected within. That 70% of us, that is water. Again, are we turning into nice, pretty, beautiful snowflakes from the Grinch? I know it's snowing outside right now, so it's perfect. Or are the words and the ways that you're speaking to yourself creating snowflakes that are rigid and like sticky and maybe don't make sense? So beginning to really think about that, because our thoughts are extremely powerful. Our thoughts can truly create our own heaven, or they can create our own hell. So let that sink in. Again, getting back into the physical and tuning into, again, the water within the body, bringing that element of water in and seeing how your words are beginning to affect the body and affect your inner snowflakes. So yeah, down to a cellular level. I find that so fascinating and just so powerful. So now we're going to move into the actual beliefs and stories that we have grabbed on as our truth, that we've identified as our truth throughout our life. And so belief is actually a word that means an acceptance of a statement that is true. And so before we go any further, I know limiting belief is a very popular term. I would even just like to begin to shift that language, because a belief is something a statement that you identify and believe to be true. And a story is something that we're telling ourselves. A story has room to be true or untrue. So rather than identifying everything as a limiting belief, because a belief sounds like it's concrete and that it's anchored and that it's not going anywhere. And a story can go in any direction. A story can change at any time. There can be plot twists in the story as well. So shifting from this idea that something's a limiting belief, again, that sounds rigid and that sounds like a little bit hard to move against, and shifting that towards a negative story, because again, these are all simply just stories we've been telling ourselves. Maybe because someone else told it to us, or maybe because we created that as our truth at some point in our life, and that's carried on with us for a little too long. So yeah, story is also just another way of saying a narrative. So the stories that you're telling in your head, the narratives that you're telling in your head, and shifting from those are your beliefs to, again, it's simply just a story. And a story can always be rewritten. A story can always be a change in the direction. And, I know I've spoken a lot about now questioning these stories and questioning this rhetoric and these narratives that are going on inside of your head, and truly asking yourself if these are your stories, if this is what you believe to be true, if this is a story that you chose to write about yourself. And oftentimes the answer is probably no, right? These are often stories that we've picked up from our friends, from our family, from school, from teachers, from society. We're constantly absorbing in other people's stories. We're constantly being projected upon, again, other people's stories. And it's not necessarily on purpose. Some of it is, some of, the marketing and the advertising is meant to affect us on the subconscious level. But again, we are energetic creatures. And as we know now, our thoughts and our words are a form of energy, that vibration, that frequency. And again, as we are energetic beings, we are inevitably more susceptible to that. And as we're human beings with emotions and feelings, when we hear something or when someone tells us something or we picked up something from somebody else and it resonates on an emotional level, and an emotion that is triggering, that an emotion that becomes traumatic, we store that within. And so I'll get into that a little bit later in this masterclass. But again, knowing that we're all energy, that we share energy, that we emit energy, words are a form of energy, thoughts are a form of energy, and really being clear on how you received this energy, on how you received these stories and these thoughts. And again, questioning them, where did I get this from? Is this really mine? Is this my truth? Is this my story that I wrote? Chances are, again, probably not. And so now we're going to dive deeper into the conditioning of it. Again, how were you conditioned to believe this? And we're going to deep dive more into this conditioning and illuminate your life. But we'll move now into the root of the story, the root of this belief, and where you adopted it from. And I'm looking at my notes here, and it'll make sense in a minute. So oftentimes when we think of the root of a story, we're thinking of, we can think of a tree or a plant or a weed even, right? So for those of you who garden, who like to be outside, who like plants, I'm a plant mama. But when you need to get a weed out, you need to dig it out from the root, right? So here's another analogy that resonated with me a little bit more, just because I think it's funny and because it's difficult to get the image out of your head. But let's take a walk down memory lane for a moment. Let's go back to your early middle school years and back to that time where you had some pimples on your beautiful face. We've all been there, and if you haven't been there, you are so lucky. I know I've been there. And pimples are gross. Pimples are ugly. They're not very pretty. Am I right? And so when you pop a pimple, it's yucky. It can be painful. It's ugly. But when you pop your pimple, you gotta get all of the yuck out. You gotta get all of the nasty out. You gotta uproot that pimple that has been congested, an infected pore. You gotta get all that out. That shit gotta go. So same with our stories, same with finding the root of our stories. Oftentimes it can be a little painful. Oftentimes people can see it, and sometimes it gets infected and it's ugly and it's gross and it's messy and it's dirty and you want it gone, right? So again, identifying the root of the story and going from the root and beginning to excavate from the root, or else it's going to come back. And again, when your pimple comes back after you try to pop it, is nasty. This is not a process you want to be going through again and again and again and again. And it gets more painful and more ugly each time you don't get the root out. Each time you kind of dabble in it and decide, ooh, this hurts too much, or oh, this is going to look even worse now. No, just get the root out. So, do you like my pimple analogy? Great. All right. So the next question is, When did you decide that this story was your truth? So going really far back and getting really clear about when you decided that was your truth and putting you back into the power. Again, we give our power away so many times to other people, to other people's stories. And we get to take our power back when we identified, when we decided that was our truth, because we can always choose again. So again, asking yourself, when did you decide that was your truth? When did you give your power away to someone else's story? When did you give your power away to someone else's story that they made up about you? Ask yourself that question. That's a powerful, powerful question. And again, that brings you back into a place of power rather than, again, letting other people project their stories onto you and you just identifying them and absorbing them. When did you decide that for you? Because again, you can choose again. And these stories that we run are on a subconscious level. Again, even if we don't know that we consciously pick those up, subconsciously we did at, the place below the surface. That's where they're stored and that's where they're held. So really getting to the root is so important to begin to identify those stories and how they've affected us and how we've held on to them and how they show up in our lives now. And so again, how does this become your truth? And we'll do a lot of work with the inner child through Illuminate Your Life. So this is a lot of inner child work, like going back to your childhood, because this is a lot of the times when we are more susceptible to pick up those stories, because children are blank slates. Children are free. Children run around. They don't have a care in the world until they decided that something was true for them that wasn't, until they decided that someone else's story was now their truth. So again, inner child work, so deep, so powerful. We'll be diving a lot more into the inner child. Again, that's an archetype we're going to go through and illuminate your life. So this next step was huge, huge, huge for me. What benefit do you receive from holding on to this story? I don't know if you're familiar with that quote. When you argue for your limitations, you get to keep them. This is the ego. This is the ego that is speaking. And so working with a client, I had a client that was extremely shy, and one of her narratives was, I'm too shy. I'm too shy for a group program. And we dove into a little bit more, and I said, why is that becoming an excuse? And she's like, no, that's I'm just shy. I'm just a shy person. And I'm like, yeah, it's becoming an excuse. And we dove further into the excuse of being shy, too shy for a group program. And if she was able to hold on to that story of being too shy, she got to keep the fact that she didn't have to be vulnerable. She didn't have to step outside of her comfort zone. She had that story to guard her of being shy. And she didn't have to be uncomfortable. She didn't have to, again, step outside of her comfort zone because she was shy. And seeing, again, how your excuses show up as arguments for you to keep your limitations, arguments for you to hold on to those stories, to keep those as your truth. Because oftentimes, again, we're popping that damn pimple. It's painful. And it hurts and it's uncomfortable and it's ugly and it's messy. And sometimes like to just throw some makeup on it and leave it feels better and, may be a little bit better for the next day or two, but it's going to get uglier, but it's going to get more swollen and it's going to need some help. It's going to need to be, dug out from the root. So again, what arguments are you making for your stories? And in what ways are you holding on to those stories through those arguments? Super, super, super important. And now moving into, once you have identified these stories and how you've used them as excuses or why you've argue for them, how has this story protected you in the past? So again, we'll take a little walk down memory lane, going back to our earlier years, going back to, maybe it was elementary school and, maybe you were a person who was shy or, a little more to yourself. And one day you decided that you wanted to go play kickball, that you wanted to go play on the monkey bars with a different group of kids, with another circle of students, of peers. And when you walked up to them and asked them to play, they said no. They said, now we're good. Like, We have our team. We don't want to play. We don't want to play with you. And immediately in that moment, that became your story. I'm shy. Because this story now is protecting you from rejection. The story is now protecting you from something that is scarier, from the fear of not being loved, from the fear of not being seen, of not being heard, of not being accepted. That the story is now something much bigger. And you decided in that moment that you were shy, that that is now your story and that is now your narrative, because that story now was protecting you. And like, how old were you when maybe that happened? 8, right? So if you're wearing your jeans when you were 8 years old and you're still trying to fit into your jeans that you were wearing when you were 8, 20 fucking years later, they're not gonna fit. Again, we've held on to that story for way too long for reasons that were so small and so minuscule, but again, we felt a traumatic experience, a traumatic feeling from that, and so it's trying to protect us. So getting curious of what the story has been protecting you from. And usually it is from a fear, from rejection, from not feeling the same way that you felt. Again, you never want to feel that feeling again because it's the worst feeling in the world. I know, I can relate, but we've outgrown that story. I know consciously in our head, we've outgrown that story. We may even not even begin to identify what that story was that led us to this, but our body remembers, our subconscious mind remembers. So again, that's why it's so important to truly get down to the root. And again, getting down to the root and allowing yourself to kind of go back in time, to go back down memory lane, which can be painful. Again, this is a lot of the inner child work, that is so important, that we'll dive deeper into and illuminate your life. And so now, again, we've kind of been leading up to this point, and I've mentioned it many times throughout this masterclass, is the next step, challenging these stories that are coming up for you, challenging them. Is this your truth? Is this true for you in this moment, here and now, not when you were 8 years old? Is this true for me, Ashlyn Bugbee, at 28 years old? Is this my truth in this moment? Questioning that, getting real with that, listening to the physical body, seeing what happens within, seeing where that's stored. And again, getting curious and getting to open up that conversation, going back and reparenting that inner child part of yourself. And, coming back to that question, when did you decide that was true? That's another way to challenge those beliefs. When did you decide that was true for you? When did you decide that you were shy? When did you decide that it was too scary to go live on Instagram? When did you decide that it was too scary to speak up for yourself? When did you decide that your voice wasn't important or worthy enough to be heard? When did you decide that for yourself? And again, building that inner relationship with yourself, beginning to deepen that awareness within with your inner knowing, that's what we'll be doing and illuminate your life. So again, this is just a taste. This is just scratching the surface level. So I just want to pop in and just check in with my friends here to see if you guys have any questions. I know there's a lot of information coming out right now. I'm spitting a lot of information at you, but I hope this is all resonating. I hope this is effective, and I hope this is relevant. So drop some hearts, drop a comment if it is. Even feel free to drop your takeaways. So far, we still have a little bit further to go, but just gonna take a breather for a second. All right, friends. So thank you for the hearts. Oh, I love you, Jackie. All right, so now that we've begun to identify these stories, now that we see how much that they affect us, even if it's truly an old story, which many of these are, now that we can begin to challenge them and question them, and we can find and identify the root of them, we'll move into the next step now, which is looking for proof. And looking for proof against the story that you are currently telling yourself. And so a good way to do this is to keep a running list, to recall all of your accomplishments, the compliments you've received, your achievements, and continue to add to this list and coming back to this list anytime you feel in your body or hear the inner critic or one of those negative voices or negative narratives or old stories beginning to come up and beginning to block you from what you're trying to do, from what you're trying to say, from what you're trying to be or experience. Beginning now to look for proof that they're not true. I'm like, wait a minute, hold up, hold up. Ask yourself, challenge them. And then, oh, I'm not shy. Like, I reach out to people all the time. Like, I have something to say. What is the proof against that story? And the proof against your story is actually your truth, your accomplishments, the compliments you receive, the nice things people say about you. That is your truth. That is people seeing you in your highest light. And that is an invitation now to hold yourself in that highest light as well. That, again, not giving your power away to someone else's insecurities, not giving your power away to someone else's story. This is the opportunity now to look for proof and to take back your power and to take back your story and begin to rewrite your story as your own in an empowering way, in an authentic way. And so, as the saying goes, when you look for something consciously, your subconscious begins to find it. So there is a part of the brain, the reticular activating system, or the RAS. And this is the part of the brain that associates meaning with objects, with things, with numbers, with memories. So again, the RAS, the reticular activating system. And so what you seek to prove, you will find it. And that'll either be you're looking for proof of your failures or you're looking for proof of your success. And whatever you're looking for proof for, again, you're going to find it in either way. If you're going to tell yourself that you're a failure, you're going to recall all of the times that you failed that test in high school, that you didn't make it onto the basketball team, that you weren't good enough, and so that person broke up with you in the relationship. Again, you're going to look for proof in those negative stories. And so again, when you begin to shift that narrative now into something positive, like, no, remember that time I aced that test, remember that time that I impacted this person, remember that time that I received this compliment, that I changed this person's life in this way, that I said this. Beginning to build up and train your mind to shift from going straight to the negative, that it always wants to by default look for the negative, and beginning to shift it and train it to now look towards the positive. Yeah, Jackie says, whether you can or can't, you're right. Oh my gosh, yes, Jackie, that is exactly it. Whatever you choose to believe is going to be true for you. And so, seeing now what stories you're choosing, the story of the wolf, what wolf are you going to choose to feed? I'm not quite familiar with that story enough to repeat it here, but I know it's a saying. So again, the reticular activating system is a powerful part of our brain. And this is where we sometimes unknowingly, again, feed into those negative narratives. Again, by default, the mind just wants to go and look for proof to protect us. Look for proof that we are failures, that we're not good enough, that we're not lovable, that boo-hoo, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. The mind wants to look for that because that is by default our place of protection. And that's also a place of a filter for the subconscious mind. Yes, I love the wolf analogy too. Jackie says that. Yeah, Jackie, if you can if you know more about that story, feel free to drop it in the comments, because that just kind of came to me. And I know you can feed two wolves. One wolf is going to be the evil, and one is going to be the lesser of the evil. I love you. Yeah, and so over the summer, long story short, my boyfriend and I, Evan, we have 100-pound Akita named Prabhu, and he is the most amazing and incredible dog. He is wonderful, except for when he is in the car. He is this 100-pound Akita that doesn't know how to sit down in the car, just paces back and forth. And we both have smaller Subarus. So whenever we take this 100-pound Akita who goes almost everywhere with us, it is it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. We have to have the windows open when it's less than 20 degrees outside, or, we have to put him in the trunk and he's all squished. And so we were debating maybe purchasing a new car, looking for a new car, just because both of ours were getting old and, shit was coming up with them. And so we were considering the new 2019 RAV4. And, not like the old RAV4s, those are grandma cars, but 2019 RAV4 came out and we were like, it's a nice car. It's all sporty and sleek and has cool colors. And once we were like, ooh, like a RAV4, that would be really cool. And then after that, we started seeing RAV4s, these 2019 RAV4s everywhere in the parking lot, on the highway, on the streets, everywhere. And, when you start to look for something consciously, your subconscious begins to find it. Oh my gosh, there's that car again. There's that car again. There's that car again. Oh my gosh, I'm getting signs from the universe that I should buy this car. Like, not necessarily, but because we consciously choose to seek that out, our subconscious is going to find it. Am I right? I don't know if anybody of you can relate to any of that with, like, oftentimes lots of that happens with purchases. If you're like, oh, I'm looking into that, and then all of a sudden you just see it everywhere. And the truth is, not everybody drives a 2019 RAV4. Am I right? Not everybody has that sweater that you want or that jacket that you want or whatever it is. It's just now that your mind is choosing to see all that. So beginning to shift and seeing now, if you can choose to see the positive stories, if you can choose to see the compliments and the accomplishments and all of the good instead of all of the bad. So the last part, dun, 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 is choosing a new narrative. And affirmations is a great way to begin to choose a new narrative. And I am going to walk you through the APES method. So number one, A of the APES is this affirmation must be attainable and it must be authentic. So about a year ago, I had a money manifestation and abundance coach that did not resonate with me, but she had me writing letters to money, like, dear money, I wish I had more of you. I feel like you leave me every time I get you. Like, like, it feels pathetic now because I was so inauthentic. And having me write these affirmations that were completely unattainable. I am a billionaire. Money flows to me easily. I am a money magnet. Like, fuck no, I was not a money magnet. I am not a billionaire. When you say affirmations and when you try to force yourself to write affirmations that aren't true to you, your subconscious mind is going to pick up on that bullshit. Your bullshit radar is going to go off because that's not true. That doesn't resonate with you because it is so unattainable for your subconscious mind that it's not going to resonate, that it's not going to do anything except just waste your time and waste your journal pages. So beginning to choose an affirmation, finding one that feels authentic and finding one that feels attainable to you. And then moving into the P, positive and present tense. Again, I don't want to be shy versus I am open-hearted and open-minded. Again, present tense, I will be an open-hearted and open-minded person. No, there's already a part of you that is. So what you're choosing to do is lift that part up, to recognize that part in you and bring that part of you to the surface. And that's another huge key and huge tool of what we're doing in Illuminate Your Life is we already have all of these parts within us, all of these sacred pieces that already live within, and we're just bringing awareness to them, to lift them up, to bring them to the surface, to let them be seen, loved, and heard. And that's what we're doing with these parts of the affirmation. When we say them in present tense and when we say them in positive form, we're saying as part of our truth. We're making that our truth and feeling that within, bringing a part of that truth that already is within us to the surface and to light. And moving into now the E, which is emotion and feeling. And for those of you who have read Glennon Doyle's Untamed, I'm sure you can resonate with the affirmation that I've been using. So simple is, I can do hard things. Because that's not something that is completely unattainable. That's something that's not inauthentic. That's something that is also positive and present tense. And when I say that, it evokes an emotion. It evokes a feeling like it's me allowing myself to remember my own truth and my own power. Yes, hell yes, I can do hard things because I am a strong, independent woman. Like, feeling that within and letting that evoke emotion, letting that begin to stir up your inner fire. So again, letting it be an emotional experience as you begin to recreate these empowering affirmations for yourself. And then I already mentioned it, but the S is simple. Keep it simple. You know, when we get into these long affirmations, when we get into these long prayers, and we're trying to repeat it to ourselves in a moment where we're battling the inner critic, it gets lost. We're trying too hard to remember this affirmation. Then again, versus I can do hard things. Again, that overpowers that limiting story, rather than I can do hard things because I am strong, because I am an independent, because I am an entrepreneur, because I've done this and this and this. Obviously, that's great, but keeping it simple is a way that you can write this everywhere as well. You can put this on a sticky note, write it on your mirror, keep it in your car, have it on your phone, have it on your laptop, like a simple small phrase that again is attainable and authentic, that is going to be positive and present tense, that is going to evoke an emotion that you're going to feel deeply, that is going to remind you of who the fuck you are and your truth, and just simply keeping it simple. So that's the apes method for creating a new and empowering affirmation. And then coming back to how I was leading into this mastermind was how do you speak to yourself, and beginning to question the way you speak to yourself, and asking yourself if you would speak to another person in that way. Asking yourself if you would speak to a child, a family member, a loved one, in the way that you begin to speak to yourself. Again, those negative stories, that harmful talk, would you ever say that consciously, purposefully, intentionally to a small child? When a small child falls, do you tell them they're a failure? No. You help them back up. You tell them to try again. You tell them that everybody falls, that that's a part of the part of the practice and a part of the process, to keep going, to keep trying, to put one step in front of the other, and one day that you'll be able to walk without falling, and one day you'll be able to run and jump. So shifting that narrative, and again, this comes back to the inner child, speaking to yourself now like you would speak to a child, because you are truly speaking to your inner child within. And remembering that and holding that piece and that part of you with love and with compassion, because there's a part of you, again, that inner child, that is, it's still free, it's still a blank slate, but it's probably scared and it's probably been hurt. And so when you speak to it in that negative way, it reinforces it. Well, when you speak to it in an empowering way, again, it begins to trigger all of your truths. It begins to remind you that that is your truth. It begins to elevate you and allow you to see yourself and hold yourself in your highest light. So again, anytime something icky comes up, anytime you feel that contraction and that shrinking within your body, come back to the inner part of yourself, that inner child. Question how you're speaking to it. How can you bring that part of you a little more love? Again, a little more compassion. And I wrote a post not too long ago that, you know, we are in constant relationship with ourselves, that this relationship with ourselves is the most important relationship, because it is the relationship that is never, ever going to go away. It is the longest relationship that you will have in your lifetime. It is the longest relationship you've had to this date, including like your parents and whatnot, but an active and continuous relationship is the one with yourself. And you can think of it as dating yourself. Again, in this post that I wrote earlier was, imagine being on Tinder, on, any of these fancy Bumble apps or whatever the hip kids use these days. I met my boyfriend on Bumble, so no shade there. I love it. So imagine being on one of these dating apps and swiping right and being like, I'm interested in that person. And when you swipe right, you're like, okay, like I would be down to maybe take this relationship to the next level. We've talked a little, I'm interested, like it seems like we have some stuff in common. Let's meet up. And then you meet up with this person. Oh no, I have poor connection. All right, I'm back. So you meet up with this person. All right, I'm back. Snowy outside. So you meet up with this person. I said that like 4 times now. And you hit it off. Everything's going right. You feel the butterflies. You feel the infatuation. You're sold. And then next time You say I love you to each other, and you're like, oh my gosh, great, I'm in love, this is awesome. And then after that, you're married. And then after that, where's the conversation? How many times a day do you say I love you? How many times a day do you take yourself out on dates? In what ways do you still show love and compassion in that relationship? Again, this reminder that you're in relationship with yourself. How many times do you tell yourself that you love you? How do you hold compassion for yourself in hard times and times where you want to crumble and times where you want to shrink? How do you hold compassion for yourself? How do you nurture yourself? And so again, this is a constant and continuous relationship. And sometimes I know I do, but I don't know about you. You forget about that. You forget you're in relationship with yourself. And a partnership with someone else outside of you is easier because that person's going to remind you. The person's going to get mad at you. That person's going to be like, hey, babe, we haven't been on a date in like, I don't know how long. Hey, babe, do you love me? Because you haven't said it in a really long time. And so allowing that part of yourself now to come up like, Ashlyn, hello, I haven't heard a I love you in a moment. Ooh, yes, girl, I love you. You know, beginning to treat yourself like you're actually in relationship with yourself because you are. So that is super important. And again, reminding yourself of that every single day and every single moment. Again, getting out of the monkey mind, getting out of the autopilot, and reminding yourself that this is a relationship, that this is a conversation now that you're beginning to open up with that inner part of you, that you're beginning to open up with the part of you that has been repeating these stories, and beginning to shift that again into a positive and an affirming affirmation. And then beginning to tell yourself that affirmation and beginning to lift yourself up. And this is another part where we're going to dive deep, deep, deep into and illuminate your life ways that we can really, truly embody and deepen that relationship with ourselves. Because I like to say that, you know, self-discovery is a form of a spiritual journey because we are not separate from spirit, that we are one, and that when we go on a spiritual journey, we're going on a self-discovery journey and vice versa, and simply deepening the relationship with ourselves because we live and experience relationship with ourselves. So yeah, Katie, yes, you're in Illuminate Your Life. I'm so excited. So that's where we're going to be diving deep into the embodied and the energetic self, is again that relationship and finding out our energetic blocks, and really again learning how to embody these affirmations, learning how to embody these new narratives and these new stories that we're choosing for ourselves. Oh, my friends, so I want to now open it up for any questions, any comments, or any takeaways. I've been going for 55 minutes and I wasn't sure that was even possible. So I just want to take a moment and, you know, extend gratitude from my heart for you, for being here, for participating, for listening, and for being receptive and open to what I have to say. I know that we went through a lot. I know that I had a lot to say. I actually have like 5 pages of notes. So feel free to also let it sink in. I want to open up the invitation to reach out to me if you're watching the replay on this as well. So I'll just kind of give you a recap, especially if you are popping in a little bit late, if you haven't been with me from start to finish. So identifying the narratives, and narratives are, you know, just self-talk, our stories, the inner critic, our beliefs. And I'm shifting from limiting beliefs into stories because belief feels concrete. It feels like something that we can't change. And a story is something that we can rewrite, that we can begin to interact with and play with and take it in a different direction and give ourselves plot twists all the time. And a story is where we keep something interesting. Stories are told over and over and over again. And when we begin to tell ourselves a story, the story lives on in the telling itself. So noticing again, when you're telling yourself those stories, you're feeding into them. And becoming aware of the thoughts that you're saying on autopilot and of the negativity effect. Again, when you begin to shift towards negative words such as don't or never or can't, you're unknowingly or knowingly giving in to one of those negative stories or limiting stories. And then noticing how your body responds. Again, getting out of your head and into your body. Where does this live inside of your body? Because your body holds on to all of it. Your body holds on to it way longer than your mind, your conscious mind does. So again, coming down into the body and really getting into that place where you feel contraction, where you feel constriction. And again, knowing that our words hold weight, that they emit a frequency along with our thoughts. So coming back to the snowflake experiment, are you going to choose to feed the wolf that's going to allow your snowflake to grow in a geometric and a appealing way? Are you going to feed the other wolf that your snowflake's going to turn out dysmorphed and ugly and distorted? So again, knowing that your thoughts and your words hold that vibration, that they emit a frequency, and that's powerful. You hold that power. So where is your power going to go? And then moving into identifying and questioning these stories and these narratives that we're telling ourselves. Where did you pick this up? When did you decide that this was your story? Is this even yours? Questioning, getting curious, beginning to, again, open up that conversation, whether that be opening up that conversation with your inner child, whether it be opening up that conversation with the part of the self that is scared, that is wanting to be protected, that is fearful. Opening up a conversation because that part of you is hurting. Just have a conversation with it. Begin to love it. Love on it, And then getting to the root. Again, pop in the damn pimple, right? Getting the root and getting the story from the root and pulling it out from the root, or else it's going to keep coming back. It's going to keep showing up. And that's how patterns keep occurring. If you don't pull something from the root, it's going to keep coming up over and over and over again. There's a quote from Siddhartha where we're not moving in a line, but we're simply moving in a spiral. We're going to continuously come back to the same things because we're relearning them over and over and over again. In yoga, it's actually called a samskara. You can think of it as a groove on a record. Again, moving in circles, coming back and back over again. Unless you remove the needle from the record, it's going to keep playing in the same way. You're going to keep repeating. So again, the root of the story, how are you continuing to feed into that story? And then what is the benefit of holding on to that story? Again, when you argue for your limitations, you get to keep them. What excuse are you making for yourself? And then getting curious, why are you holding on to that? What is it protecting you from? And then challenging them. Is this mine? Is this my truth? Is this in line with what my highest self views me as? Because you're not separate from your highest self. You are your higher self. And if you're not seeing yourself in your higher light, no one else can. No one else will. If you don't believe in yourself, it's going to be really hard for other people to believe in you too. So remembering that, and again, deciding when you made that your story, and putting yourself back into that place of power. Because when you're in that place of power, you can rewrite that story. And then moving into looking for proof against that story. Again, recalling all of the compliments, all of the accomplishments, keeping a running list, and training your mind instead of thinking about failure and looking for all of the ways that you failed in your life to now thinking about failure and saying, but no, I've achieved this, I've done this, I've accomplished this person complimented me on this, beginning to build up that list and shifting from that negative story into now choosing that positive story, allowing for your mind to move towards that positive shift. And again, the reticular activating system, the RAS, what does your brain associate with? What is your brain going to look for? And then creating a new narrative, again, moving through the APES method to create an affirmation that is going to be attainable and authentic, positive and present, and evoke emotion and simple, and speaking to yourself like you would speak to a child. And again, embodying that. And here on this live, I can't even begin to get into that. Again, I'm already over an hour right now. So there's so much value, and I hope that this has landed and has resonated with you, but know that I've only touched on and scratched the surface of the real work and the real process and how to truly live and embody these new narratives and how to choose and live these new stories through embodiment and through the highest self, through, again, the intuitive self, the intuition within, and diving deep into the shadow, because a lot of this is shadow work. This really is what shadow work is identifying these old stories, getting uncomfortable, getting into the inner child again. Where did we pick this up? Where did we decide that that was our story? Childhood. Pick that up from childhood. And then beginning to move that through our body. Again, as we are energetic beings, we'll be moving into the energetic self and the embodied self and learning how to move that through our body and find out where our energetic blocks are. And again, embodiment. For those of you who have pets, what do pets do? Like when they get up, they just shake. They like to shake things off, like literally shake things off. That is a form of embodiment because they're shaking off what's old. They're shaking off one of their little puppy dreams or one of their little kitty dreams. They're just shaking it off. So there's many ways you can approach embodiment. But again, as those stories live within the physical body, in our cells and in our muscles, we need to begin to release those from that physical level, because you can write all of the affirmations that you want. You can meditate all you want. You can tell yourself, I love you, all you want. But if your body doesn't feel that, if your body doesn't believe that, if you can't embody that, there's no point. So embodiment is huge, and embodiment is so important. And so now I'd love to invite you into this conversation of diving deeper. And again, this is all the process we'll be moving through in Illuminate Your Life. The doors are officially open and they are closing on Friday. So just a few days left to tune in, to join. And if this resonated, if this masterclass resonated with you and you want to go deeper, you want to really dive in a place that is going to be supportive, in a place with other women who are here to cheer you on, who are here to call you out when you're telling yourself a lie, when you're giving into those stories, then Illuminate Your Life is going to be an amazing place for you. So Illuminate Your Life is an 8-week journey of self-love and self-discovery. Again, as we touched on, you're not separate from spirit. So a journey of self-discovery is a spiritual journey. And we're learning to meet all of these parts, these archetypes of the self. Again, the highest self, the intuitive self, the shadow self, the inner child, the energetic self, the embodied self, and learning how to navigate those selves. You're going to love all parts of those selves and again, bring them to the surface. Let them be seen, heard, and held within your highest vision and within your highest light. And so this is a course to help you gain the tools and techniques to also receive ongoing support and to help you deepen this practice and this lifelong journey, this lifelong practice of self-love, and to step into your greatest potential and your greatest power, and to welcome in all parts of you. So what's included in Illuminate Your Life is 8 weekly group calls where in a group we'll be diving into this work more, where it'll be more interactive. And I don't know who has been participating in my women's circles, but it'll be very similar to a women's circle setting, except on steroids, and at least times 8, because we'll be meeting weekly and we'll also be with the same group of women for those 8 weeks. So really strengthening that relationship with your inner circle, choosing to uplift and empower others rather than criticizing them, rather than giving in to their insecurities as well. Again, you learn to begin to interact with others in that same way you would treat yourself. And that begins to mirror and reflect. So powerful. And in Illuminate Your Life, you'll also be receiving recorded meditations and practices such as breath work and this embodiment work that I speak of, rituals, and more. This is going to be so powerful and is going to complement each archetype that we're moving through. And you get to keep these for life. You get to come back to these at any time because these are lifelong tools and lifelong skills that you are beginning to learn and gain here. You'll also receive a 60-minute one-on-one call with me so we can go through that process together. We can go through this process of identifying these old stories, getting to the root and questioning them. We can go through that together. Also get clear on your goals and what you want to get out of the container of Illuminate Your Life and how I can best support you in making sure that you receive the support that you need, that you feel like you need, and that, of course, that you deserve. And as I mentioned and touched on already, you'll be in a space of supportive women, ongoing support, continuous. These women are here to support you and uplift you, to hold your hand and to cheer you on as you move through this journey, which, again, like popping the pimple. Sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's ugly, sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's nasty. And it's so nice to have support with you, to have someone to lean on, people that have your back, people who genuinely care about you and want to encourage your growth. And so, again, if you're still with me, thank you for being here. The next steps, if you're thinking and you're picking up my vibes and you're resonating with everything that I'm saying, and you think that Illuminate Your Life would be a good space for you, that would be a good fit, the next steps are to simply just DM me or reach out to me in any sort of way, and we'll hop on a call together and I'll just ask you a few questions. And this call is totally free and there's no pressure. I simply just want to get to know you better. I just want to get to know you more on a personal level and hear where you're at and what your goals are, and again, how I can support you and how I can be of service to you. So again, having just that call to make sure that we're on the same page. And from there, if it's a full body yes, which I want it to be, we're going to have a celebration. I want to celebrate you. We're going to have a little party, and then we'll move to payment. And so right now, to pay in full, Illuminate Your Life, 8 weeks is $975. Know that this can be broken down to 2 payments of $500 or 3 payments of $335. I'm also very flexible with any other payment plan that feels attainable and accessible to you, getting that energetic exchange in line and making sure that that energetic exchange of currency, of money, feels clean as well. From there, I'll send you an in-depth intake form where you'll fill out a ton of in-depth questions about yourself. And this is an opportunity for you to reflect on, again, your goals and how you view yourself and what you want to get out of this space. And again, also for me to make sure that I'm catering the materials in the right order and that, again, I'm of best service to you. My friends. So again, you're invited. I want you to be in this space with me. I'm so excited. I actually last minute have just added in a human design reading for the group, a human design overview, along with an Akashic record reading. So as we dive into the past self, which is the narratives and the stories that we, tell ourselves in our head, but also going into the past in a different way through the Akashic records. Akashic records are records of all souls, your soul, where it's been, where it presently is, where it's going. So tuning into the Akashic records and also doing a very powerful breathwork session. So those are some add-ins, some add-ons, and I also have some other surprises in store. Again, I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for being here, for being receptive, to being open. And please reach out if questions begin to arise. I'm always here to support you. And again, I encourage you to also reach out if you're curious about Illuminate Your Life. It's such an incredible program. And I am already celebrating the amazing ladies who have joined. It's already such a special space. And this is your invitation to join that space as well. Again, I am so grateful, my friends. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. I so look forward to connecting with you on a more personal level. If this resonated at all, feel free to send this video. It'll be shared to my page. Send it to a friend who maybe needs to hear it. Feel free to share it with anybody who you think would benefit from it. Also share it to your story. And again, I'm always open and available for questions. I can't wait to, again, connect with you more and even see you and illuminate your life. I love you, friends. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.